The ideal nation believes that every citizen is a potential leader. On this note, let us begin with this question. What type of leader do you aspire to be? Most leaders ascend to power through conquest of appearances, through wealth displayed, voices amplified, or promises exaggerated. Yet the Philosopher King emerges not by spectacle, but by silence, not by ambition, but by necessity. He is not chosen because he desires the crown, but because the crown is unworthy of any lesser soul. The Republic, in its deepest hunger, longs for such a figure, one who embodies wisdom so complete, justice so unyielding, and discipline so unwavering that his rule feels less like governance and more like guidance from eternity itself. But what makes such a ruler possible? Why do so few societies ever glimpse him? And why does the idea persist across centuries as both hope and haunting? The Philosopher King is not merely a man, it is an archetype, a myth etched into the marrow of civilization. He represents the fusion of two opposing currents, the thinker and the ruler, the ascetic and the warrior, the dreamer of ideals and the executor of laws. Most men are born to pursue either contemplation or command. Rarely does one soul embrace both. To rule with wisdom requires the courage to sacrifice self-interest, and to think with clarity requires the strength to resist seduction by power. Citizens, however, are often blind to such a figure, for the Philosopher King does not dazzle. He does not intoxicate the masses with empty fire. Instead, he radiates a gravity that unsettles. His presence demands more of the citizen than mere admiration. It demands responsibility. He calls people not to comfort, but to transformation. And herein lies the mystery. While people say they yearn for justice, they often shrink before the one who would give it to them, because justice requires sacrifice. Look into history. Those who approached this archetype, Marcus Aurelius writing in the quiet of his tent, wrestling with duty and mortality, Ashoka the Great turning from conquest to compassion, even modern reformers who carried ideals heavier than crowns, all were marked by the same tension. They were drawn into power reluctantly, almost against their will, compelled by circumstance to bear the weight of others. Their greatness lay not in their hunger for dominance, but in their resistance to it. That is the paradox. The one most fit to rule is the one who least desires it. And you, listener, are not outside this equation, for the Republic is not a stage upon which leaders alone play their parts. Every citizen is complicit in the creation or destruction of the Philosopher King. If you crave entertainment more than justice, you will never allow him to rise. If you prefer flattery to truth, you will silence him before he speaks. If you demand pleasure over discipline, you will exile him to the margins. Only when a people collectively long for wisdom more than comfort does the Philosopher King step forth. The mystery is not only about his existence, but about your readiness to receive him. There is also the inner dimension, for the Philosopher King is not merely an external ruler, he is an internal law. Within every soul lies a tyrant, a democrat, an oligarch, and a philosopher. Your appetites clamor like mobs for indulgence. Your pride rises like generals demanding conquest. Your fears elect false kings in the form of excuses and evasions. Yet, deep within, reason waits quietly, like a philosopher, unmoved by applause, unmoved by terror, dedicated only to truth. When reason governs desire and courage, the philosopher king rules within you, and only when he rules within you can he ever rule within the republic. The Stoics taught that sovereignty of the self is the only true power. Seneca warned that he who is slave to passions is more chained than any captive. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself each dawn that to govern others he must first govern his own mind. Epictetus insisted that freedom is found only in mastery over desire. These voices echo the Platonic call. Before the philosopher king can govern nations, he must govern himself. His kingdom is first internal, his empire first over chaos within. Imagine then what such a ruler embodies when he steps into the public square. His gaze is steady because he has conquered fear. His speech is measured because he has subdued vanity. His decisions are impartial because he has dissolved selfishness. Citizens sense in him something different, not the intoxicating frenzy of a demagogue, but the unsettling clarity of one who serves truth without compromise. Some will love him for this, many will resist. For his reign demands that every citizen, too, become philosopher of their own life. The mystery of the philosopher king is not that he is rare, but that he is unwelcome. The republic fears him, even as it prays for him. People cling to shadows because light exposes too much. They long for wisdom, but despise its discipline. And so, throughout history, the philosopher king remains more myth than reality, a figure glimpsed briefly, then lost in the noise of appetite and ambition. Yet his image persists because the human soul cannot forget its own highest possibility. And so the question burns within you. Would you recognize such a ruler if he stood before you? Or would you, like so many before, mistake his calm for weakness, his patience for passivity, his refusal of spectacle for emptiness? The philosopher king is not clothed in glamour, he is veiled in simplicity. To follow him requires not infatuation, but transformation. Are you willing to be changed, or do you only wish to be entertained? The philosopher king stands as a paradox in flesh, for he embodies both the fragility of man and the grandeur of eternal law. Where ordinary rulers cling to their crowns as symbols of self, he carries his as a burden of necessity. He knows the crown is not glory, but weight, not a privilege, but a test. Citizens may imagine that kingship is a throne, but for him it is a crucifix, an instrument of sacrifice where his comfort is daily crucified upon the altar of justice. This is the reason his reign unsettles. His rule does not mirror the desires of the people, but demands their assent toward what is higher than themselves. Leadership psychology affirms what Plato envisioned. The philosopher king is not attractive in the way a demagogue is. His magnetism is not built on charisma that intoxicates, but on a gravitational pull that steadies. He does not seduce the crowd with promises of indulgence, nor inflame their rage to bind them in fear. Instead, he calls them into alignment with principles that resist corruption, equity, moderation, and truth. And this is why many resist him. To follow him is to accept discipline, to surrender illusions, to become accountable. In every age, people cry out for saviors, but when the true physician appears, they resist the medicine. Consider the inner architecture of such a ruler. His wisdom is not merely knowledge of laws or strategies. It is an intimate awareness of the human soul. He sees through the disguises of ambition, the flattery of words, the camouflage of intentions. He understands that attraction is not random, that citizens choose leaders who mirror their own unspoken desires. If they crave indulgence, they elect the indulgent. If they crave strength, they choose the conqueror. If they crave justice, they will finally receive the philosopher. This is why the Philosopher King does not ascend through ambition, but through the readiness of the people. He emerges when the collective soul yearns for virtue more than spectacle. Yet how often does that yearning appear? History tells us, seldom. For the Philosopher King's emergence requires not only the shaping of one man, but the transformation of many. The republic itself must be refined, its citizens disciplined, its culture oriented toward wisdom. Without this soil, the seed cannot sprout. Thus the mystery deepens. The Philosopher King is less an individual miracle and more a collective revelation, a manifestation of a society that has chosen to love truth above illusion. But do not mistake him for weakness. His calm does not mean passivity, and his patience does not mean indifference. The Philosopher King is as fierce as he is serene. His discipline equips him for conflict without rage. His compassion enables him to punish without cruelty. His wisdom allows him to act decisively without arrogance. He is not blind to evil, nor naive about corruption. He simply refuses to be ruled by the same impulses that enslave other rulers. In him, justice is not a strategy, but a way of being. Now turn inward. Within you also waits this archetype, though often drowned by the noise of desire. The Philosopher King inside you is the voice of reason that whispers when anger erupts, the calm that steadies you when fear storms, the principle that resists when temptation beckons. But how often do you crown him? More often, the tyrant within seizes control. Your appetites command your will. Your pride enslaves your judgment. Your fear dictates your choices. You long for a Philosopher King outside, yet you betray the one within. How then can you expect to recognize wisdom in others when you exile it in yourself? Marcus Aurelius wrote that a man's worth is measured by the objects of his love. If you love only comfort, you will bend before leaders who feed your indulgence. If you love power, you will submit to conquerors. If you love justice, you will honor the philosopher. Your inner allegiance shapes your outer reality. This is why the republic reflects the soul of its citizens. It becomes what they worship. The Philosopher King can only rule a people who have crowned reason within themselves. And still, the mystery lingers. What drives such a man to accept power he does not desire? The answer is necessity. The Philosopher King does not seek authority, but when the republic trembles, when justice decays, when corruption chokes the people, he cannot turn away. To refuse would be to betray the truth he serves. His kingship is reluctant, but his duty is absolute. In his reluctance lies his purity. In his acceptance, his greatness. You must ask yourself then, do you long for such leadership because it would serve you, or because it would transform you? To be ruled by a Philosopher King is to be demanded into maturity. It is to be stripped of illusions, to be challenged in your appetites, to be held accountable in your choices. Many cry out for justice until it touches their own comforts.
Many demand truth until it exposes their own shadows. The Philosopher King is not a dream to be admired from afar. He is a mirror, demanding that you become the kind of citizen who deserves him.
The Republic, under the guidance of the Philosopher King, is not simply a political order. It is a living organism of the soul, disciplined by harmony, nourished by justice, and strengthened by truth. Yet such a state is never secure, for the forces of appetite and vanity forever conspire to reclaim the throne. The Philosopher King, then, rules not only against external enemies, but against the ceaseless rebellion of lower desires within the body politic. His reign is not a static triumph, but a constant vigilance, a daily reassertion of principle over impulse. And here lies the deeper mystery. His power does not depend on coercion, but on persuasion of the soul. Armies may enforce obedience, laws may restrict behavior, but only the philosopher can awaken reverence. Citizens obey tyrants out of fear, oligarchs out of greed, democrats out of frenzy, but they follow the Philosopher King because he resonates with what is highest within them. His authority is not imposed, it is recognized. His rule is not tyranny, but alignment, where the inner order of the people harmonizes with the outer order of the state. But this harmony comes at a cost, for the Philosopher King demands of every citizen the same discipline he demands of himself. He does not flatter their weaknesses or indulge their vices. He calls them upward, asking them to master their desires, to govern themselves as he governs. And this is why his reign is fragile. It requires a people willing to grow, willing to embrace discomfort for the sake of justice. Few nations choose such a path, for it is easier to adore spectacle than to endure discipline. The Philosopher King asks not for applause, but for transformation. And transformation is the most resisted of all demands. The Stoics knew this tension well. Seneca wrote that it is not the man who has little, but the man who desires much who is poor. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily that the throne was not a luxury, but a duty. Epictetus taught that the only true freedom is to will what is in accordance with nature. These insights converge in the figure of the Philosopher King. He is free not because he can do all things, but because he refuses to be enslaved by anything. His power lies not in domination, but in restraint. His strength is not in conquest, but in integrity. Think of how different such leadership is from the theater of modern politics, where charisma often replaces character, where appearance overshadows substance, where citizens are courted not as rational beings, but as consumers of emotion. The Philosopher King belongs to another order entirely. He does not campaign with promises of indulgence. He speaks with the stillness of truth. He does not manufacture enemies for political gain. He seeks reconciliation through justice. He does not divide to rule. He unites to elevate. In his presence, you do not feel intoxication, but awakening, not frenzy, but clarity. And still the question returns to you. Would you embrace such a ruler? Would you surrender the comforting illusions that flatter your appetites in exchange for a truth that demands your growth? Would you trade the intoxication of spectacle for the sober clarity of justice? The Philosopher King is not only an ideal of leadership, he is a test of citizenship. For to welcome him is to agree to be changed, to leave behind childish desires, to rise into the dignity of responsibility.
The republic that embraces the Philosopher King does not merely prosper, it is reborn. Laws are not mere rules, but reflections of eternal principles. Citizens do not behave out of fear of punishment, but out of love for order. Leaders are not measured by popularity, but by fidelity to justice. And beneath it all, there flows a quiet peace, the peace of knowing that governance has become an instrument of the good itself. This is the true mystery, that politics, so often corrupted by appetite and ambition, can become an act of philosophy, a living dialogue with eternity. But this vision is not secured by him alone. The Philosopher King can light the fire, but citizens must carry it. His reign is not eternal, for time dissolves even the greatest souls. What endures is the discipline he instills, the institutions he shapes, the virtues he cultivates in the hearts of the people. When he departs, the republic will either continue to rise, sustained by its love for wisdom, or collapse back into shadows if its love was only for the man and not for the truth he embodied. Thus the final secret reveals itself. The Philosopher King is not the savior of the republic. He is its mirror. He shows the people who they are and what they can become. He is the incarnation of their highest longing, the embodiment of their truest attraction. And when he reigns, it is because they have chosen, at last, to love justice more than comfort, wisdom more than spectacle, truth more than illusion. So the challenge comes to you directly. What do you love most? For your answer will determine not only the rulers you follow, but the state you create, the world you leave, and the peace you either gain or lose. Thank you for watching.